So our guest today is Lama Willa Blythe Baker. Lama Willa is a Dharma teacher and a lineage holder in the Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism. She is the founder and spiritual co-director of the Natural Dharma Fellowship located in Boston and its retreat center, Wonderwell Mountain Refuge in New Hampshire. She holds a doctorate in religious studies from Harvard University and has completed 12 years of monastic training and 2 consecutive 3-year retreats. She is also the editor, author, and translator, respectively, of The Arts of Contemplative Care, Everyday Dharma, and Essence of Ambrosia. Willa is also this month's Tricycle Dharma Talk teacher, and it was my pleasure to work with her on her series. It's called The Art of Somatic Mindfulness. And I encourage you to watch it. I'll post that link in the chat in a moment. So today, she will be offering a short Dharma talk, leading us in a guided practice, and then answering your questions. So thank you so much, Willa, for being with us today, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Eliza. It's so good to be here. Thanks everyone for showing up. And what interesting times we live in. Just very profoundly challenging in some ways and unsettling. And in some ways I feel the least qualified to address these challenges. And yet here I am, so I'll offer what I can. I don't think anyone on the planet has had a normal year. Sometimes I look at my dog, I envy my dog. My dog is just happy all the time, every day, doesn't know what the news is saying, doesn't read the papers. We're in the midst of a pandemic, and recently our Capitol building, a powerful symbol of our nation's values of fairness and tolerance and freedom, came under an unprecedented siege that, even though it was temporary, was tragic and unsettling in its implications. And on top of this, our planet is facing unprecedented challenges: climate change, loss of ecosystems, and loss of species. The planet, kind of like the Capitol, is also under siege, but it is under the siege of us, the human beings, with our ongoing violence of excessive carbon emissions. It can seem at times as if the world has lost its sanity, its ability to watch out for itself. It's tempting in all of this, I would say, I am tempted to believe that the world has gone insane and that we are sane somehow, but the world is insane. And this, I realize that this is a part of the insanity. If we are sane and others are insane, then we are caught in the very act of othering that has made the attack on the Capitol or our daily attacks on the biosphere possible. It's the division into sanity and insanity that makes for intolerance and oppression. So what I want to talk about today is a simple idea from a contemplative perspective on what it means to be sane. I want to explore that there's a kind of sanity that we all have, that even animals have, that has nothing to do with a diagnosis of being free from mental illness. This kind of sanity can be opened up when we are calm and clear, in a state of meditation, for example. But it may be there are other practices that help us find this kind of sanity: yoga, tai chi, swimming, hiking, being in nature. This is a sanity of the spirit and the heart that is not polarized against an insanity that threatens to upend it. And if there's one thing that we need right now, or rather I feel I need right now, so all I can do is share my experience, it is sanity. But first, here's a question. What is meditation? And what does it have to do with sanity? Meditation is an act of settling the body, mind, and heart into stillness in order to listen to the quiet symphony of your own experience. This is something that we rarely do in our daily life. To do this, we have to start by slowing down and paying attention. And I was thinking about how, remembering this book by Timothy Leary, Turn On, Tune In, and Drop Out. You remember that from way back in the 60s? We need an entry into mindfulness for the digital age that goes unplug, slow down, and drop in. Unplug from our devices. I know we're on devices now, so temporary plugging in can be a good thing, can help us at times, but having periods where we do that and where we slow down and we drop in to the present moment, drop into our body, drop into our breath, and drop into whatever is happening in the mind and heart. To find this kind of sanity, we first need to disconnect from the constant barrage of information. We've been conditioned to believe that knowledge is power. That may be true, but too much information is disempowering at times. It captures and steals our attention. So that's why unplug. We have to reclaim our attention. Attention is a kind of sanity. The ability to stay with whatever we're focusing on, wherever we're mindful of, for some period of time enough so that we can go deep instead of just wide. Right now, I'm staying with an old friend in Florida, and she has a lot of pets. She has a bunch of cats and a dog. And it's been really joyful for me to be around so many animals at the same time. And I've been noticing these last few days here in her home in Florida that animals are good guides to our natural sanity. They're already unplugged and they drop in so well to whatever's happening in the present moment. Their ears are perked up and their eyes are scanning for something that might move in the underbrush. But they're very there. They're really, really there. There's a part of the self that is accessed when we get very quiet and centered. And that part of the self I would call presence. It's the ability to notice that while we might think many, many things are happening in the outside world, and we think that lots is happening on our screen or in our inbox, we think that things are happening with others who are not even in the room. We're thinking about happenings that aren't happening right here and right now. So there's a kind of an alternate reality that we enter when we start to commit to a contemplative practice. And that alternate reality I would call present moment reality, the now. So the first aspect of this sanity, this equal opportunity sanity that we all have, if we just look into our experience, turn into our experience, is presence. The ability to rest in what's happening in the here and now. And when we settle that way in the here and now, we start to notice things about our experience that we may have never noticed before. And one of the first things we notice, especially if you're beginning meditation, and if you're an old meditator, you'll recognize this. Somehow this never completely goes away. Oh, were it so that it went away. The other thing that we notice is our internal insanity. when we slow down and we become very present, we notice this constant barrage, these trains of thinking, and they're just rushing like a waterfall, these trains of thinking through our mind, so much so that at first it seems it's never going to be possible for me to become still. That's what it seems like at first. We notice what we call in Buddhism the monkey mind, the mind that is bouncing, the attention that is distracted and moving and can't seem to be without thought. We notice our addiction to thought. And that's a very enlightening moment, because what also goes on at that moment, the other light bulb that goes on first, I'm insane, first light bulb. Second light bulb is maybe my sense that the world has gone insane has something to do with the fact that I too am insane. And when I say insane, I mean bumpy, anxiety-ridden, troubled, uh, distracted. So we notice that, but we also notice in time, so we notice our internal insanity. We also notice in time, as we watch that internal insanity, that not everything that we think is true. First, it's that. Not everything that I think is true. So we notice this barrage of thoughts, but then we also start to notice some of these thoughts, so much energy. And do I really know this is true? So much energy, and yet it's ephemeral, right? It comes and it goes in one moment. Is that really true? Is that real? So we start to ask ourselves the question, is everything that I think true? Maybe not everything that I think is true. So the first dimension of this contemplative sanity that we discover is that present moment is attainable. We can become present. And there's a world in the present that has nothing to do with everything that we read or think. There's a sanity in the present, a fullness of what we hear, what we taste, what we feel, what we see, that is immediate, uncomplicated, and beautiful. The second aspect of this contemplative sanity, which is really everybody's potential sanity and everybody's sanity at times, is that not everything that we think is true. That brings a kind of sanity, less trouble when we understand that we are part of the problem. So also, as we start to settle down like this, we begin to notice that there's not only the monkey mind, there's not only the craziness, but there's also somebody watching the craziness. There is this very simple observer, this pure witness who is just seeing, just experiencing, just watching. And that experiencer, that watcher, is stable. So that takes some time. We have to practice for a while, practice in meditation for a while, but we start to notice that there's just this bare awareness, and it coexists with the insanity. Isn't that interesting? That our insanity and our sanity, we could say the total wildness, the wildness of our monkey mind, and the sanity of our just awareness of that, the balance, the ease, the attention of just awareness of that are both happening at the same time. So we could say there's that kind of sanity that is just the watcher, the witness. And that witness somehow is able to hold all of the insanity, that they can both be there together. So also when we slow down into that state of being more centered and easeful, the state of just watching what's unfolding, state of meditation, we develop a kind of curiosity that is wondering what is going to happen in the next moment. And an exploration of, in the present moment, when something does arise, what exactly is it? What is a thought? Where does it arise from? When it dwells, where does it dwell? When it goes, where does it go? So we step back from judging any particular thought. This is a good thought. This is a bad thought. This is a violent thought. This is a peaceful thought. To just thought. Just thought, all welcome. Just thought. So we become curious rather than judgmental. John Kabat-Zinn sometimes describes this as an inherent part of mindfulness, that real mindfulness is not judgmental of whatever arises. That is a kind of sanity, this non-judgmental awareness of whatever is arising. And finally, in the meditative state, another dimension of sanity that we encounter is this ability to notice our whole organism and how it responds to stimuli. We become more sensitive. How do I respond to sound? How do I respond to certain sounds? How do I respond to the sunlight on my skin or to the wind on my skin? And we notice things like how we eat affects how we sit. And when we're meditating after eating, our mind is a certain way. When we meditate after we've had several hours away from a meal, we notice how we sit. We become microsensitive to the organism that is this human self. And we learn how to titrate and to adjust. So I would add to the skills of contemplative sanity, or the sanity that arises from contemplative practice, is the ability to titrate, to know when you've had enough, and to have enough self-care, enough self-awareness to titrate your experience so that you can be more in balance. And finally, I'll talk about this sanity that we discover in the meditative state as a discovery of spaciousness. I think one of the things that stresses us out so much about being our connection, say, to the news that we do have to pay attention to some degree, because we have to be responsible citizens. We have to steward our communities, our country, our families into the right direction, that kind of thing. We do need to pay some attention, but we definitely can become crowded by the information that we know, crowded by our own responses to that information. We feel overpopulated within our own body and our own mind, overpopulated by all of the thoughts and feelings that are storming through our organism. So part of the wisdom of meditation practice is the discovery that there is more than just the content of what is happening inside of you. There is an openness. There is a space that you can access in the mind that I like to think of as our primordial sanity, something that is always there, but very rarely noticed, in the same way that we rarely notice when we're watching a movie that there's a movie screen. We are so caught up in the images, but actually there's just an open, empty canvas there too, that is accepting and yielding and holding those images. Our awareness is like that, our primordially sane awareness that holds all of the thoughts and feelings that are arising. And so in meditation, we have this opportunity to start to encounter that spaciousness and have some other place to dwell that is not just our internal insanity of the monkey mind, and the external insanity of whatever chaos is arising in the world around us, some place to be that is a refuge, a replenishment, a place where we can nourish ourselves and engage with the world from that place, from a place of greater balance and wisdom. So, those are my thoughts today. And I wanted to draw us into a very short meditation practice that can help us encounter this primordial sanity, just even for a few minutes. And that can be as simple as the unplugging. And I don't want you to unplug from your computer here, but I want to suggest that you close your eyes or that you turn away, just so that you can be within yourself, um, as our unplugging stage. So these three stages of unplugging, um, slowing down, and dropping in. So to unplug, we'll just close our eyes, or you can turn to a window and gaze out the window if you have one right there. Or if you have a wall, even, you can gaze at the wall. It's possible to meditate with the eyes open. Getting comfortable on your seat. And just to help us connect to the breath and the body, we will take 3 deep cleansing breaths. You can join me if you like. In a deep inhale and a deep, full exhale. 3 times at your own pace. Those 3 cleansing breaths help us to slow down and help the nervous system to drop into greater ease. And as a way of dropping in to presence, you think of dropping down from the thinking mind into the feeling body. Noticing how your body is naturally grounded and stable. Notice where your body meets the cushion. perhaps where your feet are meeting the floor. If you're sitting in a chair. And just for a little while, let that groundedness of the body absorb your attention. And stabilize this flighty mind. You'll notice that the mind may continue to feel restless, looking for the next thing to hold on to. And as you notice that, trust the body's stability, its groundedness, and let that stability and groundedness draw your attention back naturally, like a magnet pulls iron filings. From that place of groundedness at the base of the body, allow your attention to migrate slowly up the torso to the diaphragm, where there is this rising and falling of the breath. Breath breathing you. And notice how this breath, this gentle, natural rhythm of movement, inhale and exhale, coexists with the stillness and the stability in the physical body. Just like the thinking mind coexists with the stillness and the stability of the watcher. Now, gradually let your awareness expand so that you're taking in the whole panorama of what's happening. As if you were the sky and everything that's happening, the weather. Thank you, everyone, for the meditation. And I'd love to hear from you what you're all thinking about these days and might have want to share or have questions or want to reflect on. And feel free to ask questions or offer reflections. I think Eliza will explain.
Thank you for the talk and the practice, Willa. That was lovely. So yes, everyone, if you'd like to offer a reflection or ask a question in Zoom, please click on Q&A and enter your question there. And Facebook Live, please leave a comment. So I'll start to go through the questions that have come in. Let's see. Mark is asking about sort of choice of language. Mark says, would you consider a different word than insanity and sanity? For those of us with genuine diagnoses of mental illness, they can be triggering words associated with illness.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. I just think we're all mentally ill. So I mean, seriously, we all have something. And so for, yes, I would certainly consider other words, but I actually think I too have self-diagnosed myself with certain things, or at least with social anxiety disorder. I think I have some of that, for example. And I find the thinking about primordial sanity with the word sanity to be empowering because it doesn't pathologize anything, actually, that the insanity that we have, insanity is never separate from primordial sanity. It permeates whatever we're experiencing. And so for me, it's a depathologizing construct. But I appreciate your question, and I think it's very important. And so I will certainly think about other words. And I think you can also transpose other words there. Primordial goodness, primordial resilience, primordial wisdom. The tradition, at least the one in which I practice, calls it primordial wisdom. Thank you for your question, Mark. That was good. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Natalie, who says, if we are not judging thoughts, are we not losing the opportunity to have less intrusive, uncontrolled thoughts, delusions, the causes of suffering, the origins, as Buddha taught, and more positive, kind thoughts, the causes of happiness?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a place for noticing what is positive and the cause of suffering within the self, as the Buddha taught. There's a place for that, and that place is a place of discernment, and it figures into a mode of practice connected to ethics. We want to be attentive to developing positive qualities in the self, compassion, kindness. But here's the logic of the meditative, the non-judgmental side of the meditative awareness. We cannot truly make those choices until we accept that everything exists within us. So, and I mean by that is, if all we do is judge our thoughts, if that is our main practice, this is a virtuous thought, this is a compassionate thought, this is a cause of happiness, and this is a negative thought, this is a thought, this is a klesha, this is anger, this is going to be the cause of suffering. You know, if we move into that place of bifurcating, then we are cutting off a part of the self, and we risk avoiding, suppressing, and bypassing that particular pattern or emotion. And the non-judgmental awareness helps us see that ultimately, everything is welcome. Relatively, there's some work to be done, but ultimately, we need to do that from a place of kindness to the self and non-judgmentalness to the self. Because in the reality of things, everything is just energy. Everything is just human, right? Anger is human. Jealousy is human. These things that we think of the darker parts of the self are human and don't need to be exiled. They can be loved into freedom. They don't have to be demonized. In fact, what you resist and demonize grows stronger. And here I'm really not speaking just from theory at all, because I used to subscribe to the theory pretty strongly that those things needed to be uprooted. And I've come around through my own practice to believing that the most skillful way, and you can take it or leave it, is to love these things into freedom, not to banish them.
Thank you. We had 2 questions come in directly in the chat during your Dharma talk. People asking, Pepita and Kathleen both asked what you meant by titrating awareness and attention.
Yeah, titrating. So what I meant by titrating is the ability to notice your state and to value your state enough so that you, in chemistry, what titrating means is you change the amount that you are putting into something, like you're putting into a test tube. You titrate means that you might put less of that thing in order to get the proper result. You titrate, which means that you adjust the amount. So we can do the same thing with ourselves, adjust the amount of toxicity that we are willing to be exposed to, for example, either with our body or with our mind. And titrating means having an awareness, boy, this thing really impacts my heart and my emotional self so strongly. It's okay to step back from that stimulation for a while in order to heal yourself, to stay whole and balanced. And when I really think of titrating for myself, my main act of titrating has to do with the media. I have to be careful. I'm very sensitive. I think I'm an empath by nature. When I read a sad story, it can stay with me for days. It can eat at my heart. It can take my attention away from the present moment, from the people right around me who need my love and attention, or they need connection. And so I have to pay attention to how much of that I'm going to imbibe and be a part, how much it can be a part of my experience at any given moment. That's titration, just thinking about what makes sense for you. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to pivot to a few of the questions we have about current events and how people are coping. So an anonymous attendee is saying, for those of us who have daytime jobs, where discussing the insanity of the world and how we're dealing with that insanity is not appropriate, it can feel like we have to bifurcate ourselves 8 hours every day. How might we integrate better so as not to contribute to the insanity?
It almost sounds like you're saying that you're being instructed not to talk about that what's happening in the world in your workplace, or that it's not appropriate to be talking about it. Is that right? Do I have that right, Eliza? Is that what you're getting from the question?
That's the sense I got from it,
Okay.
that they can't talk about it.
Okay. I think there are, I think it's important to process what's happening. We need to process. So I would say to find other outlets for that, maybe family, friends, and then to ask yourself how much of that is enough for you, and how much can you handle. But I think some processing of what's happening, because it is so severe, and because we are citizens, we need to pay attention, some attention, with family or friends, maybe at night. Yeah, and there's also an ability to, or something we can do as meditators, which is a kind of noticing our own reaction to what's arising and learning to befriend what's arising in the self, fear, frustration, anger, to learn to meet that in the self and to befriend it. It's a great opportunity to be with our feelings. Sometimes our feelings are feelings of self-righteousness, feelings of impending doom, grief, whatever it is. To learn to befriend whatever's arising is a very profound practice, and can be as simple as stopping, breathing, turning the gaze inwards, and having self-compassion for whatever's arising, coming around it with a sense of self-compassion, maybe even putting your hands to your heart and sensing into the feeling with kindness.
Thank you. Next question is from Aaliyah, saying, sometimes I feel with the current political situation, things are very divided, which each side thinking the other is evil and wrong, misinformed, and needs to change their views. How can we approach this political situation from a Buddhist point of view, taking into account the four innumerables? I think maybe also the four immeasurables.
The four immeasurables, yeah. So loving kindness, compassion, equanimity, and rejoicing. So how can we do that? I think there's a lot to be said for realizing or starting to explore, maybe as a question, these these other viewpoints, our viewpoint and the other viewpoint, or even just two different viewpoints. Are these really out there? I mean, they may be out there. Sure, they're out there. I'm not saying they don't exist, but I'm saying, is that all there is? Or can we see some of that mirrored in the self? So just like there are, others with views other than ourselves, we like to think that person is the other and that their viewpoint is wrong. But the more you sit with yourself, the more you realize there are parts of yourself that you feel that way about. There are parts of yourself that you suppress and you exile and that you demonize, just in the same way that two outer parties demonize each other. That's going on in yourself too. And as you begin to sit with your own being in contemplative practice or in psychotherapy, there are other ways to explore this, the mandala of the self. You begin to notice that the things that you most demonize are actually in yourself also. Becomes much harder to be right all the time. So I think that kind of inner exploration, for us to do that ourselves, to start to heal inside the self, can be a real contribution when we're in conversation with others, or when we're in the public sphere, to begin to realize that the other who expresses something that's abhorrent to us can be tolerated. So we don't just turn away, but we're willing to turn towards that because we've seen the abhorrent in ourselves too. That's just my own thinking on it at the moment, for what it's worth.
Thank you. Victor is asking, how can we use meditation to deal with panic and anxiety disorders?
Well, I completely resonate with that question. I have experienced panic and anxiety in the last year at different times for various reasons. And have found actually that meditation is useful. The most useful of all is a practice I was just describing, of learning to not turn away from the anxiety, not turn away from the panic, but to learn to be a container, a container that can hold the panic and hold the anxiety. In other words, a kind of ability to withstand one's own mental states, without imploding. And I think that is something that meditation, just by virtue of doing it as a daily practice, can contributes to your ability to hold whatever's arising. I think that's one of its most important functions. I used to think in my younger days, when I was gung-ho for enlightenment, that awakening was, or meditation was, all about happiness, just becoming happy, just becoming ecstatic, reaching the heights of human consciousness. I was so excited about that. But in time, what I realized is much of what meditation is helping us with, which is even more, I think, more beautiful and transcendent, is not reaching the heights of ecstasy, but reaching a state where you can hold the storms that are raging through your being with grace and compassion as much as you possibly can do as a human being, and being forgiving of yourself when you can't. And I am somebody who is an advocate for, or I believe that you shouldn't dismiss the idea of medication. If you need medication occasionally, you should take medication for those stresses. But I also think we can work on the self a lot with that. I thank you for that question. That's very alive for me at the moment. Anxiety is my particular inner challenge, and so I'm sorry that you're feeling those feelings, and I totally resonate with the pain and the suffering of that as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to have about time for, I think, 2 more questions. So I'm sorry we won't be able to get to everybody's. But if anyone has a lingering question for Lama Willa, Lama Willa is answering questions on the Dharma Talk page on our website. But let's see. Lori is saying, thank you very much. Would you please explain the watcher again?
The watcher, the watcher is when we're sitting, we don't notice the watcher when we're not meditating, I think, at first. Much of the time we're so caught up in what we're seeing, what we're experiencing, what we're feeling, what's coming in through the doorways of our senses, especially through the eyes. We are very caught up in the appearances that are arising, and we're not paying a lot of attention to the one that is watching all of that. And when I say the one, this is a big question. Who is the one? What is the one? That's a Vipassana question. Vipassana means insight. It's a question that we can hold sometimes in meditation practice, to try to turn inside and see, who is the witness? Who's seeing all this? This is incredible. Someone is witnessing this. There's a sense of all of this is being witnessed, right? So this idea of the watcher is getting more intimate with the one who is witnessing, the one who is seeing, the one who is experiencing, and then asking in a very innocent way. Innocent, I mean, without anticipating an answer. Who is watching? Who? And trying to look in and see the who in a practice of meditation, or in life even. But what's nice about meditation is you get calm enough, and you kind of close or internal, you get internal enough so that you're quiet enough to begin to see the watcher, to begin to see who is meditating. And when you start to see the who, or when you start to look into the who, you notice there is this very simple, very basic consciousness that is just experiencing. It isn't thinking about what it's experiencing. It's just experiencing. And that very simple consciousness is a key to finding what I'm calling here in that talk that I gave, primordial sanity. This part of the self that is very simple, steady, unshakable, and we can relate. We can find and attune to that, because it's who we truly are. It's not just the witness and the seer, it is the deeper self or non-self, anatta, to use Buddhist terminology. It's very quiet, that witness. So that's why we meditate to see it.
So one more question. Brian says, could you speak a bit more on cultivating curiosity?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Brian, for that question. Yeah, being curious is so, it's not just critical in meditation practice, although meditation practice invites curiosity about our own experience, but it's so important for life, isn't it? Like, just to keep alive this part of ourselves that wants to learn and grow and know more. And the only way we can really do that is by being curious and open, by asking questions and inquiring as much as we um, uh, close. And we don't. It keeps us from closing down when we inquire. And very important, curiosity in relationships. In relationships, it's so easy to believe we know somebody. So easy, right? Just to say, I know, I know so and so, or I know my mother, or I know my sister, I know how they are. And we forget that we don't. We may not. In fact, we definitely don't know everything about them. And our life is so enriched by asking, what is your experience like, or what was it like for you? So much more interesting than saying, oh, I know what it must have been like for you, right? So I think that keeping that as an ongoing practice, the practice of inquiry, very helpful in meditation, and in some ways the path, the path of the Dharma, the path of practice, the path of exploration, the path of a seeker is the path of inquiry, the path of asking the questions and resting, sometimes not having to rest because we ask the questions, having to rest in not knowing the answer. That's a very powerful practice in itself, just to be without an answer in the space that opens up can be quite enlightening and good practice for life. Yeah. Thanks for asking about that, Brian.
That wraps up Q&A. Thank you so much, Willa, for joining us today.
Oh, sure. So glad to be here.
Yeah, this was lovely. And thank you to everyone around the country, around the world, who made the time to come join us. The recording of this session is available right now on Tricycle's Facebook page, and we'll also be putting it up on YouTube later today. And you can find recordings from our previous sessions on YouTube as well. And keep checking tricycle.org/live for upcoming sessions. I'm going to put that in the chat, and I'm going to put the link again to Lama Willa's great series about somatic mindfulness, mindfulness of the body. And I'll just ask you to share any parting thoughts with us.
Thank you so much, Eliza. It's been wonderful to be here with all of you during this very unprecedented, interesting time that we're living in, and just delighted to be here with you in meditation, in Sangha, and I wish you all the very best for your own lives. I wish you ease, health for you and your families. Thank you.